An edge 3 nanometers wide, thinner than a single strand of DNA, made in a field 10,000 years ago by someone striking one rock against another. Modern surgical steel, at its finest, leaves a cutting edge roughly 20 times wider than that. Standard hospital scalpels are often wider still. The tool your surgeon uses today is, by this one specific measure, cruder than what a hunter-gatherer produced from volcanic glass before any civilization existed. This is not an accident of history. It is a consequence of physics that no amount of manufacturing has managed to solve. Obsidian, volcanic glass, fractures along lines that follow the molecular structure of the material rather than any grain or boundary. There is no grain in glass. The break runs clean to the atomic level, producing an edge that under a scanning electron microscope looks nearly perfect. Smooth, continuous, and almost impossibly thin. Steel, no matter how carefully ground, has a crystalline structure that limits how fine the edge can actually get. You can sharpen steel past what the eye can see, and past what a fingertip can feel, but the material's physics eventually stop you. Obsidian's physics stop somewhere else entirely. Ancient humans appear to have discovered this the way they discovered most things, through accumulated observation, repetition, and comparison across generations. Anthropologist Colin Renfrew, working at Cambridge, spent years tracing obsidian artefacts back to their geological sources using chemical signatures unique to each volcanic deposit. What he found was that obsidian from the island of Melos in the Aegean Sea was turning up in Franchthi Cave on the Greek mainland as far back as 11,000 years ago. Someone was crossing open water specifically to get this rock. Not for food, not for shelter, for the cutting tool. That effort, a sea crossing for a stone, tells you something about how well these people understood what they had. Obsidian from specific volcanic sources had specific fracture properties, and the people who worked it knew the difference. They weren't stumbling onto a useful material. They were seeking out a particular rock with known qualities, the same way a modern surgeon specifies the exact grade of steel they want for a procedure. The scale of that trade tells you how widely the knowledge spread. Obsidian from Cappadocia in central Anatolia has been found at sites across the entire Levant dating back 9,000 years. Obsidian from Obsidian Cliff in what is now Yellowstone Park has turned up at sites more than 1,000 miles away in the American Midwest. This material was not locally available almost anywhere it was used. People built supply chains for it across mountain ranges and open water because no locally available stone performed the same way. The demand was specific, consistent, and ancient. The most dramatic evidence of what they did with it comes from skulls. Archaeologist John Verano at Tulane University has documented more than 800 trepanations from ancient Peru. Deliberate holes cut or drilled through living skulls. Some small, some large, some performed multiple times on the same individual. The most striking finding is the survival rate. In samples from the period immediately before and during Inca rule, roughly 80% of trepan skulls show new bone growth around the opening, proof that the patient lived for months or years after the operation. Whoever performed these procedures was doing something that worked, cutting through a skull without killing the patient from blood loss, infection, or shock demands exactly the kind of clean, controlled edge obsidian provides. The modern chapter of this story belongs to Don Crabtree, a flintknapper at Idaho State University who spent his career studying and replicating prehistoric stone tool techniques. In the early 1970s, Crabtree was scheduled for open-heart surgery. He was dissatisfied with what standard surgical steel would do: the blade geometry, the edge width, the cellular damage a wider cut leaves behind. Before the procedure, he made a set of obsidian scalpels to his own specifications and gave them to his surgical team. His surgeons operated with his blades. Crabtree survived and lived for another decade, dying in 1980 from unrelated causes. What Crabtree understood, and what later research confirmed, is that the narrower the cut, the less cellular damage, the faster the healing, the smaller the scar. Surgeons who have used obsidian blades report cleaner incisions, reduced inflammation at the wound edge, and faster recovery. Obsidian hasn't replaced steel in mainstream surgery for one reason only. You cannot manufacture obsidian blades in a sterile factory at scale, guarantee consistency between individual blades, or make them disposable the way stamped steel scalpels are disposable. Steel won for logistical and economic reasons, not surgical ones. The hunter-gatherers who crossed the Aegean for Melian obsidian, who produced trepanation tools precise enough to cut skull bone without killing the patient, were not working from a theory of molecular physics. They didn't know what a nanometer was. What they had was something functionally equivalent. Thousands of years of observation, comparative testing across generations, and transmission of craft knowledge precise enough to keep the best techniques alive long after the people who first discovered them were gone. The result was a cutting tool that solved the problem completely, and in a way that modern manufacturing, for all its precision, still hasn't equalled for pure edge geometry. The edge a skilled napper produces from volcanic glass today is the same edge produced 10,000 years ago in a field, with no laboratory, no theory, and no supply chain. The physics were always there. Ancient hands just found them first.